Recording. Okay, good. And now we'll just go live over on Facebook. Give me 1 second. All the tech fun.
I know, that's
I know.
best part is the tag.
I know, that's right, eh? It's always a joy. Okay, go live. All right, we'll just give that a second. It's fun though. It's fun getting to talk to all the different people in all the different places.
Yeah, I think it's amazing that we can do this actually.
Exactly. Yeah, it gives you so much more opportunity. Okay, I think we're good. Let me just double check. It says we're live, but I always like to check. You can never really trust. Okay, good. Yes. Awesome. Okay. Wonderful. Welcome, Ricki.
Oh, thank you so much.
I'm so excited to have my friend and fellow nutritionist, Ricki Heller, joining us today. I swear one of the questions I get the most, and obviously you do too, but I mean, I really hear it, is around sugar, right? This is such a big issue for people, and it's everywhere, and it's so insidious, and so once it gets a hold of you, it's so hard to get off of. And when I ask people sort of like, what's the biggest challenge for you in terms of, staying on track with healthy eating or making those healthy choices and changes you want to make? Oh my gosh, 80-90% of the comments are always about sugar. I'm addicted to sugar. I have a sweet tooth. I can't say no to sugar, So I always am interested in what Ricki's doing, because she's like my go-to guru for all things sugar and sugar alternatives, and how we can sort of live that sweet, delicious life without the nastiness of sugar. So I wanted to have Ricki here today to talk to us a little bit about that whole world, but also some of the alternatives that are out there and some of the things she uses. So Ricki is a nutritionist, and she's also a cookbook author and educator, and yeah, so I'm really excited to dive into it with you today. So I'm going to hand over to you first. I would just love for you to introduce yourself a little bit better than I just did, and tell us a little bit just about your journey with sugar. And I know, Candida is a specific focus for you. So talk to us a little bit about how you got from there to here.
Sure, I thought that introduction was great, but as you probably know, I consider myself a sugar addict, and I will often say jokingly that this started in the womb, because my mother was type 2 diabetic, but she transferred all of her microbiome, all of those good bacteria and bad bacteria, when I was born. And so I feel like I kind of just grew up eating sugar from a very young age. And I actually, when I think about it, I did, because I learned how to bake when I was like 6. We had an aunt visiting, and I remember standing, I could barely see the top of the kitchen table, but she was stirring chocolate chip cookies and showing me how to do it. And so we always had baked goods in our house. And it, on one level, I think of my mom, who was type 2 diabetic, but on the other hand, my dad, it was an immigrant who grew up on a farm, and so he only wanted to eat homemade things, and he always wanted a sweet with dessert. And so we always had homemade baked goods in the house. And once I knew how to do it, it really just became a problem pretty young when I look back, My sisters and I, one of the things, I was just telling the story of how we all knew how to bake, and we had this cake recipe that we loved because it was really quick. It could be done from, stir to eat in 20 minutes. And so then when we didn't even want to wait 20 minutes, we would my younger sister and I would mix up a bowl of frosting and just eat it as a snack, like pure sugar. So anyway, this went on for years, went through university, and I would have cake for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, all kinds of the worst eating habits you could possibly imagine. And then I really didn't make the connection, although I had a whole bunch of health issues. I'd been diagnosed with IBS when I was really young, like 18 or 19. And I never made the connection until I was in my late 30s, early 40s, where I had this series of sinus infections. In 4 months, I had 6 sinus infections, and I went on 6 courses of antibiotics. Horrible. And I saw an alternative doctor who finally diagnosed me with Candida overgrowth. And that's when I went on this really crazy strict diet for a couple of years, and everything got better. And then just to show you the power of sugar. So I had not eaten sugar refined sugar, I would say. I didn't eat sugar at all for 2 years. I didn't have refined sugar for close to 10 years. And it was the Christmas of 2008. And I had been feeling great for 10 years. No symptoms. And I thought, I'll just have a little piece of chocolate. So you can imagine what happened. Like within, I'd say 3 months, it's totally back to eating frosting out of the can and horrible, horrible. But this time I started developing more symptoms that I went back on the diet and they wouldn't go away. So that sort of scared me straight. And I realized I was addicted at that point. And I also realized that this Candida thing was not to be messed with. So I went on a very strict diet and I worked with a naturopath and I went back to the holistic doctor and we all worked together. And it took, again, about 2 years for things to settle down. And that was 2009. And I've been on what I call a modified anti-Candida diet since then. You know, I've brought back a lot of the foods. Anybody who knows this diet knows how restrictive it is.
Can you talk a little bit, just for people who don't know what Candida is, can you just give us a like totally high level, what is Candida?
Yeah, so Candida is a form of yeast, and it's naturally in the body. It's kind of like the other germs and bacteria and all those little microbes that live there naturally. In our gut, it's about 20% normally. It takes up about 20% of the gut microbiota, or all the different organisms in there. But it's often called the cockroaches of the digestive tract, for the reason that, you know, they say that if there was a nuclear holocaust, God forbid, these days that isn't so much of a joke, but if there was a nuclear holocaust, cockroaches would be the only things that would survive it, right? So in the digestive tract, same sort of thing. When everything else gets killed off, the Candida still lives, and it can eat almost anything, and it can reproduce like mad. So if you have something that upsets that balance, like if you take antibiotics and kill off all your good bacteria, or even just eating a lot of sugar, as in my case, or over-the-counter drugs, birth control pill can do this, and even stress, a lot of stress can do this. It upsets that balance, and it allows that Candida to just start proliferating, and it grows out of control. And once you have an imbalance and there's more Candida than there should be, that's when you start getting symptoms like I had. So things like sinus infections. The biggest symptom is like overwhelming sugar cravings, the kind that make you get out of bed and, you know, drive to the store in your pajamas. Or the other number 2 symptom is what they call foggy brain or foggy thinking, where you sort of feel like you're in a cloud all the time. You can't focus, you can't concentrate. But then you get all these other sort of surface symptoms like Candida yeast infections, Candida rashes, which is what I had on my chest. The other ones, anything fungal, so like athlete's foot or, you know, toenail fungus, all these lovely things that are related to fungus and yeast and mold.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah, so it's very hard to get rid of. You really have to go on this very strict program, but it's not just the diet. A lot of people think the diet alone can get rid of it, but my personal feeling is that you really, the way it is now, and the organism's getting more resilient and used to some of these treatments. So I believe that these days people would need, at the very least, natural supplements to also get it under control.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Other than sort of the way sugar contributes to Candida overgrowth, what are some other reasons why we kind of want to get sugar out of our lives?
Yeah, because I mean, if you read the news or whatever, you hear a lot of this lately. But I think the number one that most people know is that it affects your blood sugar levels, right? So, you know, we often talk about the big spike and then the crash. And if you eat sugary things in the morning, you might have that lull in energy in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. But I think more importantly, with those blood sugar dips and peaks and valleys, is that your insulin levels are getting out of whack. And because it's such an important hormone in the body, that can then, you have this cascade effect of all these other things being affected. So blood sugar levels, it's really bad for your blood sugar. And I just read, not a study, I just read an article about how it's actually apparently insulin, which in our body helps to control overgrowth of cancer cells. And so if we eat a lot of sugar and the insulin levels are not balanced, then that's allowing those cancer cells to grow. So people who eat high levels of sugar tend to be more prone to getting cancer. So there's a cancer sugar link. And as you know, like, sugar has no nutritional value. So you're eating something that's not giving your body anything good or anything that it really needs. A couple other things. Oh, the one that I always think about is that sugar suppresses the immune system as well. So depending who you read, I've read from 1 hour to 5 hours. So, but it definitely suppresses immune function. So you know, I remember when I was a kid, and you probably were told this too, you know, if you have a cold or whatever, I was always given tea, you know, with sugar, and probably that wasn't helping me, you know. So that's another one. And then just two more I want to think of is inflammation in the body. It increases inflammation, which can lead to all kinds of chronic conditions. And also it creates an acidic environment in the body. So, you know, we are alkaline beings. Your blood alkaline levels always between 7.35 and 7.45, which is slightly alkaline. But with sugar, you're going to be more on the acidic side of things. And when you're more acidic, again, same sort of thing, you tend to be prone to more illness, chronic conditions, inflammation, all those lovely things. So I just, you know, over the years, I've come to the conclusion that honestly, I just do not see any reason to consume sugar at all.
Yeah.
Your body does not need it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's doing the opposite. It's actually hurting you. So yeah, it's fantastic. So and a lot of people do want to avoid sugar. So so I see a lot of my clients, leaning towards artificial sweeteners, a lot of diet pop, like diet soda, right? Diet Coke. I have a lot of clients that I would consider to be Diet Coke addicts. Yeah. And there's a lot of products out there now with a lot of, trying to, sort of capitalize on this sugar-free wave that we're kind of in right now. And so a lot of artificial sweeteners coming out. So talk to me about the difference between natural sweeteners and artificial sweeteners.
So yeah, I mean, you're talking to somebody who I don't think I've ever said this out loud before, but I used to drink one of those 2-liter Diet Pepsis a day, like a day. I know, like I think it's like, oh my God, it's burning out my insides. I'm thinking that horrible, horrible. So it's, and if I could stop, anybody could stop, seriously. So yeah, because the way I look at it, what I consider a natural sweetener, it's like the name says, it's from nature. Mm-hmm. So my own personal test is if it's a sweetener that I personally could create or derive from the natural source myself, like in my kitchen or my backyard, let's say. So as an example, stevia, which most people know, stevia actually grows as an herb. You could grow it in your backyard. You could dry the leaves. You could pulverize the leaves yourself, and you'd have a powder that you could use as stevia, for instance. That's the most natural form. Or even like maple syrup, for centuries here in Canada, for those who aren't in Canada, we've tapped maple trees, and the sap of the maple tree, you boil it down, it turns into maple syrup.
Right.
So that you could do yourself. I consider
honey, that. Right. You could get honey out of if you were brave, you could get honey out of a
yeah. beehive. I actually know someone who has beehives. Yeah. I didn't think of honey, of course, because I don't consume honey, but yeah, absolutely. And honey is a very healthful sweetener, actually. So that to me is sort of the natural source. But the other thing about natural sweeteners, because they're natural, they come from plant sources or bees or whatever, our body knows what to do with that to break it down and digest it and make use of it. And I will never say that sweeteners are health foods, but natural sweeteners do still contain nutrients. So my favorite example is maple syrup per volume has more calcium than dairy milk. So like, obviously you're not going to drink a glass of maple syrup, but I once did the calculation, and 2 tablespoons of maple syrup, which is pretty common, what you might put on your pancakes on the weekend, is 25% of your calcium for the day. So, it has some nutritional value, and depending on the natural sweetener, some have more, some have less, whatever. But most of them will have some kind of vitamins or minerals in them, which gives your body something in addition to the sugar, raising your blood sugar. So I think that, if you are someone who is healthy and doesn't have, Candida or some other reason to avoid sweeteners entirely, natural sweeteners are a great alternative. Whereas artificial is something that like literally is, since today's International Women's Day, I'm going to say woman-made instead of man-made, human-made, where you need a lab. And it also, I think, changes the original chemical structure. So like maple syrup is maple syrup. You're just boiling it down. Honey, you're not changing it. Whereas when you create something like aspartame or sucralose, which supposedly comes from sugar, they say, but you're changing those molecules. You need a laboratory to make that. And so I think what happens is our bodies don't really know how to use that. We can't metabolize it effectively, and it puts a strain on your liver, which is your body's main filter, and you end up with all kinds of health issues over time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like that, just we want to be eating real food, right? We want to be eating, things that your body would recognize as food, not chemicals. Yeah, yeah, fantastic. And I know, again, it's so sneaky, it's so insidious for people because, like you say, with the Diet Pepsi, like I do have so many clients that get so hooked on those artificial sweeteners, and I do think there's an addictive property to them as well. There's some magical combination of when you mix caffeine and artificial sweeteners that, like, it's
Yeah.
really hard for people to get off of those things. So
Yeah.
those are some great reasons why we should do that. That's fantastic. So going back to the natural sweeteners then, obviously we're going to put artificial sweeteners off the table. Looking at then the options in terms of natural ways to sweeten things, what are your favorites? Like, give me like maybe the top 3 or top 5 that you really like.
Okay. So,
or that are maybe the most popular and people would have heard about,
Yeah, because with the ones I have as somebody on a Candida diet might be a little different. I can talk about those too. Like those are very low glycemic, but I think some of the natural ones. I mean, maple syrup is a beautiful sweetener if you can get it. I know some people in Australia might have problems, but it's a beautiful. And as I haven't had maple syrup since 2009, but as I recall, it tastes amazing. It's just a lovely, lovely sweetener, and it has some nutritional value. So that's a really nice one. I also think not as much as it used to be, but brown rice syrup had been very popular. I think maybe what's kind of usurped brown rice syrup these days, I see a lot of coconut sugar, coconut nectar, and one of the more recent additions, which is very low glycemic, is monk fruit sweetener or Lohan Go, which is sometimes combined with other things. So those are 3. And I don't know if you ever use date sugar, which I hear a lot about.
Yeah.
Which is, because dates have the highest concentration of natural sugars in all fruits, they just literally dehydrate them and grind them up into like this granular sugar. The only thing with date sugar is it doesn't melt. It doesn't dissolve the way regular sugar does.
Right.
So I found when I was using some of those natural sweeteners, like with my second book, Naturally Sweet and Gluten-Free, I wasn't yet back on the anti-Candida diet. So I was using maple syrup, agave, coconut sugar, trying to think if there was anything, and a little bit of brown rice syrup in those days. And those are some really nice ones. I think agave, again, has sort of fallen out of favor because it's so high in fructose, and that can put a strain on your liver too. But coconut sugar, and certainly maple syrup and date sugar, those are all really good ones. You can get date syrup too, I think.
Okay, good. Yeah, I use just real dates all the time. Like I'll put a date in my smoothie, or if I'm making like chocolate balls or something for the kids, like I put dates in them. I find dates is one of my favorite sweeteners because at least too, then you're getting some of the fiber, right? I know they are very high in sugar, but it's a natural sugar, and you, like you say, you're getting more. They're bringing more to the party than just the sugar, right? There's some nutrients, there's a great deal of fiber, so it's slowing that absorption of the sugar into your bloodstream a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Sadly, I can only have dates extremely rarely.
I'm sure. Yeah.
But I love them. They're great.
Yeah. So when we're talking about, like you're saying for the anti-Candida, you're looking at a really low glycemic index sugar, and what we mean by that is a sweetener that doesn't raise your glycemic index, right? It doesn't give you that spike. And like you're saying for anti-Candida protocol, that's what we're really looking for, and just for health in general, right? I think for whether Candida or not, it's good to be looking on the lower glycemic index of things. Again, just for all those reasons you described at the beginning about our blood sugar, inflammation, all of that stuff. So what are some of the best low glycemic index sugars? Like, what are you using?
So again, these are all only natural sweeteners, but Stevia or Stevia, depending who you ask, is my number one still. It's my favorite, but it's not useful in every application. So Stevia will come, and you want to look for the pure extract. So some of the products have fillers in them. So if you're buying something that says Stevia that measures 1-for-1 like sugar, that means it's got all kinds of fillers in it, because Stevia is up to 100 times sweeter than sugar. So you're going to only need a teeny tiny bit if you want to match the sweetness of sugar. And that's why I like to use the drops. So maybe like 5 drops in a whole bowl of oatmeal, and that's sweet enough for the whole bowl. So in that case, if you think about it, like if you're a baker like I am, and you've got a recipe that calls for a cup of sugar, no matter how many drops, it's still not going to be anywhere close to a cup. And plus you're substituting a dry sweetener for a wet sweetener. So it doesn't really work that way unless you also make a whole bunch of other changes to the recipe. So I don't use it a lot for baking unless I'm combining it with something else. But I love it for drinks and just basically wherever I can use stevia, I do. I just love it because stevia is 0 on the glycemic index. So it has 0 impact on your blood sugar.
Love it.
And then my second favorite which, maybe I should talk a little bit about the sugar alcohols, because a lot of people think they are artificial, and they're not. They sound so chemically to me. I avoided xylitol. It's like anything that ends in tol, right? So xylitol, mannitol, erythritol. The two big ones are xylitol and erythritol, but I avoided them for years because I thought, no, those can't be natural. They can't be natural. But everything you read about them says they are naturally derived, and they exist naturally in the original source. Like xylitol is often derived from birch
trees, right? Yeah.
So, and I love the reason they're called sugar alcohols. I don't know if this is, for some reason, this amuses me. They are called sugar alcohols because the molecule has a shape that is similar to sugar molecule and similar to alcohol molecule, but there's no sugar and there's no alcohol in it. So anyway, so my personal favorite is xylitol. There are two big ones, xylitol and erythritol. And the thing with sugar alcohols is because of this molecular structure that our body can only digest, you don't have the complete enzymes to totally digest and absorb them, which is why they're lower calorie than sugar, because we're actually not absorbing them all. But it's also why they can cause digestive upset, because as your body's trying to break them down, you produce gas and fermentation. So two reasons why I like xylitol better is because we actually do have the enzyme for xylitol, but just not a huge amount. And as you continue to use it, your body begins to develop more and more and more of that. So at this stage, I've probably been using it for, I would say, years at this point, at least 2-3 years, or maybe a bit more. And there's no reaction anymore for me. Like, I don't get anything when I eat xylitol. But erythritol, while it's a little bit lower glycemic, so I think xylitol is like 7 on the glycemic index, which is still really low. Erythritol, I believe, is 0. So no impact on blood sugar. But you don't develop that enzyme over time. So you're always going to get bloating, gas, possibly diarrhea if you eat too much of it. Like, if you eat just a little, you won't, but if you eat too much of it, which of course is our tendency with sweet things, right? So so I like xylitol for that reason. And also xylitol, it inhibits Candida growth. So for me, it's like a no-brainer. And it's granular. So the beauty of these sugar alcohols is they measure 1 for 1 with sugar. So that's a really good thing. But if you want to steer clear of those entirely, like I was saying, monk fruit is a really good one. It's literally just a dehydrated fruit, and it's much sweeter than sugar as well. So again, the quantities will vary. And another one that I love is yacon syrup, which is basically made the same way as agave or maple syrup. It's tapping this syrup from a plant. But it's also 0 on those. Well, you got to be careful. There are different brands, but you can get ones that are raw and are 0 on the glycemic index. Other ones seem to have been processed and they're higher on the glycemic index. So just read the label, make sure it has 0 sugars. It kind of tastes like blackstrap molasses, I find.
Yeah.
That's really nice. Yeah.
Do you have any tips about stevia? And I know you did a whole stevia challenge a while ago, which was so fantastic, because myself, and I know I hear this from other people, is that I love the idea of stevia. I wish I loved stevia, but I feel like it has that sort of artificially sugar, like artificial sweetener taste or aftertaste. So I'm sure you have some tips on how can I fall in love with stevia?
Yeah, and that's exactly what my ebook is that we're going to.
Okay, good.
For people. So it's actually a starter guide for loving stevia, but basically there are lots of things that you can do. And I would say if you're just starting out, the number one tip would be combine it with another sweetener. So stevia is so sweet that, so as an example, in a lot of my recipes when I was using coconut sugar, to lower the amount of coconut sugar, because it is still moderate on the glycemic index, I would do half coconut sugar and top up the sweetness with stevia. And that way you don't taste the stevia at all. And it also allows you to lower the overall glycemic index of the complete baked good, right? Because there's... Oh my
God. I love that tip so much. I'm going to go try that right away this weekend. I'm going to make something.
I'll send you my sweet potato brownie recipe.
Good. Yeah, because I have struggled. I've tried different stevia brands. Because I want to love it, but I just can't get over that flavor. So I love that tip. Great one.
Okay, good. Yeah, and then like I said, there's more in the Celebrate Stevia ebook, which is kind of like a starter guide for that challenge I did.
Okay, great. And you're going to share that we're going to share the link to that here, right? You're going to Okay, good, good. So people can grab that if they're interested, if they want to learn how to love stevia too, because it is so fantastic and such a great option, and so healthy. But yeah, so and I know that Ricki has some great tips on how to make us love it.
And I can honestly say I do love it now. So
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure it's just you just we got to have the right recipes and ease into it a little bit. Okay. Um, so give me sort of like, what is for all these people that I'm sure are going to be watching this and ask me questions about how to kind of get off sugar. How do I go from being a sugar addict to, I do want to reduce sugar. I do want to live a delicious life without sugar. What is kind of what's some top advice? What's a tip that you can give people for making that transition and making it not quite so painful?
yeah, because you don't want to do it the way I did it. The first thing I'm going to do this as like a two-parter, I think.
Yeah.
The first thing is to figure out why you're overeating sugar. So like it might be a physical addiction, with blood sugar issues, or sugar, as you well know, it triggers dopamine production. So it might be like a physical thing. It might be an emotional thing, in which case speak to Sarah. It might be Candida, speak to me.
Yeah.
Or it could be psychological, it could be habitual. There are many, many reasons, and I think honestly it's really important to at least have some concept, because if you try to address one but you're still using the other to eat sugar, I don't think you'll be successful. But what I would say is, if somebody's like healthy even and they don't have any issues, let's say they just want to start cutting sugar out of their lives, my best tip would be, and this might go contrary to what most people would say, but I would say to begin with foods that are not necessarily that sweet, so that you're not going to notice the switch. So as an example, I wouldn't start by replacing all my baked goods with baked goods that have stevia, or baked goods that have even maple syrup if you're not used to tasting that. I would say start with the things where there's only a little bit of sweetness, like your homemade salad dressing. I used to put sugar in my salad dressing, now I put stevia. It's only 3 drops. You don't notice it in there, right? Or like I said, a bowl of oatmeal where maybe try maple syrup instead of your regular brown sugar, or something that isn't going to be that sweet. Or beverages are always really a good idea too, like a smoothie, for instance, that has all the lovely flavors of the fruit in there anyway, and that's going to be your primary flavor. Then if you add a little bit of stevia instead of your date or whatever you might normally use, you probably won't notice it. And I think once you get used to eating those things, you move on up. So I would then move to something that's a little sweeter, and then I might go to baked goods.
Interesting. Okay,
and
good.
also, like I said, to cut your sweetener with stevia is another good way to do it.
Yeah, I love that way to kind of wean yourself onto it, instead of, like you say, just going from a normal cookie to just 100% stevia sweetened cookie. It's hard. So
Yeah,
I love the idea of kind of,
do that anyway, to be honest. Because like I said, when you're baking, it's going to change the texture. I think I have one recipe on my site for a muffin that's stevia only sweetened. And it really took like literally hours and hours of experimentation. I think I made 20 different versions of that muffin, because then I had, especially vegan muffin, right? You have to adjust the amount of fat, you have to adjust the amount of liquid, the amount of flour, like everything else has to change. And the balance has to be just right, because there's so little stevia that you're losing all that sugar and all the effects of the sugar.
and baking really is chemistry, right? More than cooking savory things, right? Baking, it matters, all those ratios. So you can't just, swap out a cup and a half of sugar for 5 drops of stevia and expect the muffin to work out. So
Exactly.
That's good. Okay, this was so excellent. I did have one question from Patty in my Facebook group. She just asked, because she wasn't able to join us live, but she wanted me to ask you, she's using something called stevia in the raw in her tea, and she was just wondering what your thoughts are on that, or if there's any difference between that and normal stevia.
Yeah, and so I don't use stevia in the raw. I have to say, I don't even know if we can get it here in Canada, but I did a quick check, because you never know with some of these products. I know that some of my favorite products, I consume them, and then one day they taste a little different. You look at the ingredients and they're changed, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to check the ingredients, even if it's something you think is safe. But so based on what I just looked at this morning as we were chatting before, there apparently is dextrose in stevia in the raw, which is a filler, but it can create reactions in the body because it's a form of sugar. So dextrose and erythritol is a combination, and if it does, and again, I mean, I'm not an expert on that brand, but if this site is correct and it has those ingredients in it, you don't want to have it. So maybe what I'll say is going from the other angle, whatever product you want to use, if it's stevia, you want to look for pure stevia extract in there. So it should either say whole stevia plant or pure stevia extract. And there really shouldn't be other ingredients except for maybe glycerin, which is a carrier liquid, or filtered water, or if you don't mind having alcohol as the carrier, like some vanilla extracts, for instance, would have alcohol, then that would really be it in my books.
Okay.
So yeah, if it has anything else added to it, it's suspect in my books.
That's so frustrating. I hate that. I mean, I feel for people because, a brand name like Stevia and the Raw, it sounds like pure, like that sounds like, oh, that must be 100% pure stevia, right? But it's one of those kind of health washing, maybe.
Well, if that's the case, I mean, I could not find the ingredients listed on their own site. So Stevia and the Raw folks, if you're watching, send us your ingredients. We'd love to.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. I'm sure that will be helpful for Patty. I'm just going to look here before. I just have to look at my phone and see if there's any questions because I can't see on here, just in case anyone's joining us and has a question for you. I don't want to miss it.
Anything else added to it?
See, there's my
There
lovely little echo. Sierra's asking thoughts on raw honey.
So again, I don't actually use honey, but I do remember from what we studied in nutrition school, as you probably know, Sarah, like raw honey, again, it's a much more healthful form than the stuff that you buy in the store that's processed. It's had all of the good stuff stripped from it. So as an example, honey, some people suggest that honey has antifungal properties, it has antimicrobial properties, but only the raw form does. It's not the processed form that does. The processed form is basically liquid sugar, from what I can tell. So I would always go with pure raw honey. And apparently Manuka is like one of the best for health purposes.
I know. I use Manuka for when we get sick and stuff. I put some in tea and stuff. Yeah, it's supposed to have great enzymes. And I always look for, raw unpasteurized honey. So so that you make sure you get all that goodness too. So that's great. Okay, so just before we wrap up, tell us a little bit more about the ebook. We touched on a little bit, but tell us the full story of the ebook.
Okay, so this is an ebook that I created. It's kind of a companion piece to a program that I'm working on stevia and fully loving stevia. But this is to get people started and to give you some of the most important steps to learn to love stevia. So what is it and how do you use it? And the tip that I gave about combining it with other ingredients, but also a couple of other tips on how to love stevia. And I talk about brands and I talk about amounts of stevia, like how you would measure it, and there are also recipes included that use stevia along with some other sweeteners so you can get started and have an idea. So this is actually a free ebook. It's a gift for people who are watching, and I would love you to just grab a copy. So you can get it it's just my website / Celebrate Stevia. It's called Celebrate Stevia. So it's rickiheller.com/Celebrate Stevia, all one word. And
okay, I'll make sure to put that link above or below or somewhere so people can just click on it too when we're done here. So that's great. And I'm going to be downloading that myself because I really want to love stevia. I'm trying.
It can be done. Yes.
It can be done. I believe you. You're the one, and you're the one to help us get there. So
I'm sending you that recipe, Sarah.
Okay, please do. Okay, great. And other than the ebook, where else can people find you if they want to learn more about you, get your cookbooks, get more recipes from you? Where's the best place for them to go?
So probably my site, which is just rickiheller.com, and there are more than 800 recipes, none of which has refined sugar in it. So I am a sweets person, so there's a heavy balance towards desserts and baked goods, but also like entrees, salads, soups, appetizers, all kinds of recipes there. And I also post health articles about not just Candida, because that's my thing, but because the diet is so restricted, all of my recipes are free of gluten, eggs, dairy, and sugar. So if any of those apply, the recipes would be good for people.
Yeah. And we totally didn't even talk about this, but I recommend your website all the time to clients because I have a lot of clients who are vegan or plant-based, and I'm sure there's other people, but you're the only person I know that helps people get off sugar and do anti-Candida without all the animal products, right? From like pretty much every other resource I see out there that's helping people with an anti-Candida diet is meat, and more meat, right? And so, I'm not vegan, but I don't really eat I don't eat animal products for the most part, and many of my clients don't. And so it's a hard place for them, right? Because it's like, how do I get rid of the sugar, get rid of some of those refined carbs without just eating chicken breasts all day.
I know.
So I'm so grateful that you created this resource and that you have so many amazing recipes, because I just think it's just something we need so much more of, because you can do a plant-based diet and anti-Candida in a beautiful, healthy, nourishing, wonderful way. And Ricki is like, she's the light on that journey. So I recommend your website all the time to my clients, because it's the only place I know where you can find those kind of resources.
I forget who I was talking about. I was just saying that my book, which is called Living Candida Free, and it's recipes, but it's really meant to be more of a guidebook and a resource book for people on this program. And I believe it's the only one that takes a 100% plant-based approach. And so it's not like I'm subscribing that you have to be plant-based, but if you are, that's a great resource for you.
I really don't know anybody else who's doing what you're doing. So it's so great and helpful for people. Okay, good. I think that's the question. Lots of other lovely comments. People enjoying our conversation. That's great. Okay, good. Anything else you wanted to share with us, Ricki, or do you feel good?
Yeah, I feel good. I mean, all I will say is, if someone like me, who is literally buying cans of Betty Crocker frosting and eating it with a spoon, I am not joking. I would go through a whole can. Like, I'd sit there and just until I was sick. If I can get off sugar, honestly, anybody can. You just have to start.
Yeah, I love it. It's true, because I think a lot of people feel like, well, it's easy for you because you're a nutritionist and everything, but I am a real sugar addict. But you know exactly where you came from, the same place as many of them are in now. So that's really, really inspiring. So thank you. This was lovely. And I know this is going to be super helpful. This was super helpful for me. I learned a lot. So this was great. And I know it's going to be helpful for a lot of people. I'm going to keep this recording around for a while, because again, it's the question I swear I get the most about. It's all about sugar. So thank you for helping us on this journey.
Thank you. Great to talk to you.
Awesome. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.